Am I, 30F, responsible for half the cost of a house mortgage that only my BF, 30M, will be signing? My boyfriend is planning to purchase a house in a year. He can afford it. I can't, since he's a first-time buyer. He plans to take advantage of first-time homeowner loans or whatever, and suggested that I don't sign on the mortgage for it so that I may also take advantage of that same first buyer deal in a few years when we're more prepared for a second property. He wants to buy a duplex, live on one side and rent out the other to cover some of the costs. And then later on I buy a place and we move into there and rent out both sides of the duplex to cover more of the costs of both properties. It makes sense in my head, but in my gut I have a weird feeling about it all. He still wants me splitting the mortgage and all the house bills. I'm of course fine with splitting utilities and such like we are now. But shouldn't I just be on the mortgage in that case? If I'm paying towards the mortgage, property taxes, any home fixes, etc.? Or like, am I going to become like a tenant and required to sign a lease agreement under him? That alone sounds strange because I'm his partner, not his tenant or roommate. I'm not well versed in how all this works. So any advice or words of wisdom for the home buying process and whether or not that plan is a good or bad idea would be helpful. Paying half the utilities and maybe some portion of fair market rent for the half of the duplex you'd be living in sounds fair. But that's it. Not repairs and certainly not $5,050. First, understand the difference between the deed and the mortgage. The deed is ownership of the house, an asset. The mortgage is the loan to buy the house, a liability. Usually the same people are on both, but not always. Legally, if you live in a house you don't own, you are a tenant. It doesn't matter whether you have a rental agreement, or whether you pay rent, or whether you pay anything at all. Tenant means you live on property you don't own. What I would strongly advise you to consider is what you would be getting if you insist on being on the deed and mortgage. Yes, you would co-own the house, so you would be building equity, and you would have the right to live there if you broke up. But you're not going to be accessing that equity unless the house is sold. The equity you build will be a very small amount of what you actually pay toward the house, which will mostly go toward closing costs, interest, taxes, WAF fees, and other random expenses. So let's say you buy the house together and then you break up. Now you're in the position of being liable for a huge mortgage loan on a house you don't want to live in. And any route to entangling it involves cooperating with your ex, who may have very different ideas about what he wants to happen. In the best case scenario, getting away from this house is going to be a big, expensive hassle. Now think about what happens if you don't co-own the house and you break up. You move out and go find somewhere else to live. That's it. And he can't throw you out immediately, because you have rights as a tenant to stay for, per your local laws, at least 30 days if not longer. And if you don't break up, either way, then ownership doesn't really matter as long as the two of you consider the house a shared asset. My advice: if he can buy the house by himself, let him be a tenant, and pay a third of the mortgage as your rent. Put your extra money in a high-yield savings account and you're likely to come out ahead versus building equity as a half-owner. Regardless of your relationship status, you're gonna need to pay for housing, not just utilities. Wherever you live, you are a partner, but you are also really a tenant because you are living in a space you don't own. You may choose to sign a rental agreement. This also protects you in the event that your relationship ends and you want to move quickly, i.e. a month-to-month type agreement. Did he say you are putting money into repairs? That's not part of mortgage costs, and would be unusual for him to ask. The fact that he's pretending this is about looking out for your best interest is absolutely Infuriating to me. This is about his wanting you to subsidize his home purchase. And no, I do not believe you should be paying for half a mortgage when he's the only one getting equity. More importantly, are you telling me you're supposed to pay half the mortgage for a duplex? What happens to the money made from the other part of the duplex? Is he planning to pocket it all? Don't do it. And if his plans are to keep all the profits from the duplex arrangement, while you cover half that portion of the mortgage, run like hell from this greedy jackass. You're not stupid and you're right to question this arrangement. You shouldn't pay 50-50 on everything. Not at all on repairs. The fact that he makes 3x as much as you and thinks you should pay half of a mortgage that isn't yours is a little concerning. Look for a compromise here, and if he is resistant to that, hold off. If you are not on the mortgage or deed, then no, you are not legally responsible for payments. If you want to pay while you are living there with your BF, that is up to you. But there is no legal obligation. Let me see if I understand this. The rent from the other side of the duplex will be covering some of the mortgage, and he wants you to pay half? How much of the mortgage for his sole and separate property does he intend to pay? Sounds kinda like he wants to not be paying the mortgage at all and splitting the other bills. By the way, ask a reputable mortgage specialist about this. But in most cases, you can be on the deed without being on mortgage and still qualify later as a first-time buyer. Here is my advice. 1. Learn about the first-time home buyer incentives and assistance programs you need to educate yourself so that you can make the best decision for yourself. I was snooping and saw you are in Austin. There's tons of info I was able to Google. 2. Do you have a say in the property your BF is purchasing? Did he ask for your opinion? Did you go house hunting together? If not, then this is not just technically his property, but in his mind it's for him alone. Not a good sign. 3. How much is half of the mortgage and whatever else you will be responsible for? Can you honestly afford it? Would it be less expensive if you were to rent an apartment on your own? 4. I can see the benefit of him purchasing first and you saving your first-time home buyer benefit for later. But that's only if you are 100% sure if the relationship and that you will be together in the future. I see you've posted some concerns about your relationship a few months back. Things to take into consideration. 5. I always recommend, when possible, people should to be financial independent before joining finances with a partner. That way there are less power dynamics at play. You are still young. Don't make any decisions that will leave you disadvantaged in the future. A relationship should be mutually beneficial. Logistically it makes sense, but it would be a risk for you BC if you broke up. You'd lose everything you put into the property and have no rights. How long have you two been together? Why would you want to be on the mortgage? Be a tenant. Pay rent to him and he can put that money toward the mortgage or whatever he likes. That way, if things go south, you don't have to worry about mortgage or getting your equity back. If you do get married, that's when you talk about putting your name on the deed or buying your own property to rent out. This is a legal question, and the legal answer in these situations is heavily dependent on where you are. Be cautious about advice you receive on Reddit. What applies in one place won't apply in others. I'd strongly suggest you get legal advice where you are to answer your questions. You should not be paying a share of the mortgage and certainly no maintenance or repairs. You should be paying rent and share of utilities. Most PPL in US advise not to buy a house county-owned if not married. Personally wouldn't bother me. BCID do the same if we rented somewhere. Only thing I may have issue with is repairs. That's for the landlord to handle. Same as renting. That's why I prefer renting. Maybe a small amount of rent, but nothing towards repair, and half the utility bills. Since you're helping him, he should help you by charging much lower than market rates for a room, so you should still be able to save money for your own house safety net. And make sure you do use this opportunity to save. Landlords are responsible for all repairs, so do not contribute to repairs. If you can't afford what he's charging and you can't save money for your own house in case things goes bad with the relationship, don't move in. Simply put, if you are on the deed, you are an owner. Whether you're on the mortgage or not doesn't matter. If you are not on the deed, you are putting money into a house and getting zero equity. It's a raw deal for you. You have no legal protections should your boyfriend break up with you. Even if you put $20,000 into that house, it was as a tenant and you will not see that money again. You can check your local laws about tenancy, but most places don't require a written lease agreement. You reside somewhere, get mail there, pay a monthly fee. That makes you a tenant. Don't ever pay for a mortgage you're not legally benefiting from down the line. I would read into the different types of mortgages. There are pros and cons to first-time home buyer mortgage and also buying single versus married. Not saying it is bad. I would explore all mortgage options and see what works best for you. If you want to buy a house, I believe if you do first-time home buyer, you're not allowed to rent it out for profit for some time or something and only to be used as primary residency. I would check into that. It sounds like he's presenting this whole situation that will best suit his wants and needs. Financially, do you want to own a house? There are pros to not being on the deed. If you break up, you're not stuck with the house, but also you won't be able to receive any equity on profits if you sell. Not saying you will, but he sounds like he's direct and wants to control the outcome to his favor. Not saying this will but may lead to issues down the road since you legally have no say in the property, as you will just be a tenant. Your name will legally not be on the mortgage or the deed. Everything will in his name and he will take the equity and credit benefit. You would be a glorified tenant in the eyes of the law. The way he presented this emo, he sounds controlling and wants this all to work out to his benefit, and pushing you down a path that he wants you to in regards to buying for his benefit. But at the end of the day, is this what you want to do? Is something such as home buying and even marriage important to you? I mention marriage since he says he wants you to buy a property single to benefit from first-time home buyer. Emo. My gut doesn't sound like this is a good idea either. It sounds sketchy and he's not taking in all the factors of what home buying and renting is. Home buying in general is a lot. Renting out to tenants can be hard work and also take in the cost of how much you'll be purchasing and take away from renting. I would reach out to a realtor and speak with them to maybe gauge their input. But as someone who went through home buying and selling as a single person, I bought under a conventional loan, and when I sold, my realtor explained the differences between them all when I was selling. It's not sunshine and rainbows as your boyfriend makes it seem to be unless he has a bunch of cash on hand. Long story short, no, you will not be signing anything on the deed or mortgage. How much you would owe would be between you and your boyfriend. But based on reading it again, I highly advise against this idea. You can co-sign on the mortgage and still be eligible for a first-time home buyer credit for another house later on. My ex-husband co-signed for his mom and she had the first-time home buyer credit, and he was able to use it a few years later because his mom claimed it. Apparently the credit only applies to one person. I'd be paying half of the utilities and not half of the mortgage. If you want you to pay half, you put your name on it too. In my country, any partner that is paying even a part of the mortgage can make claims to partial ownership of the apartment. Because of this, one either needs to let their partner live in really cheap by only paying for gas, water, etc., but not any part of the actual mortgage. I think that it is reasonable to want their partner to pay for something if they live in, but it is not fair to make them pay for 50% or a significant amount of the mortgage if they are not legal co-owners. Otherwise you both live there 10 years. He has a house but you don't. These things need to be discussed carefully together so that nobody is taking advantage of the other. But also to see that you're not binding yourself legally to a person you still don't know will be there for you in the future. From your post history up, I am not sure he is a person one should commit to.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.